Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first event of our Sacred Heart University Anniversary Series. Anniversary since indeed it's been now 30 years that we've been bridging higher education and industry in Luxembourg. Sacred Heart University has been in Kirchberg, Chambre de Commerce, since 1991, and we've been offering AACSB accredited graduate level programs tailored to the needs of working professionals. We offer different academic programs, amongst which the full-time MBA with internship, a part-time MBA, business certificates, as well as executive education for companies. My name is LECLERCQ, and I will be your moderator tonight. After a few years in the Big Four world, I joined Sacred Heart University Luxembourg a year ago. I'm now responsible for the full-time program for the MBAs. I'm also in charge of the marketing and communication strategy, and I'm an executive coach. Tonight is my pleasure to kick off our anniversary series, focusing on a fascinating industry, making Luxembourg the place to be, the private equity sector. To discuss the evolution of the market, to discover what the industry will look like in the future, and to understand how to navigate and succeed through this evolving sector, we are very honored tonight to welcome Aissata COULIBALY, EY Private Equity Associate Partner and Board Regent Member of our university, Jens HOELLERMANN, Sacred Heart University Private Equity Professor and InTabulis Managing Partner, Christine IMPENS, SHU MBA alumni and finance manager at Three Hills Capital Partners, and Stephane, LPEA CEO. We could not start, of course, this event tonight before getting a full picture of this amazing industry. We would like to get a clear understanding of where we are today, and who is better positioned tonight than you, Stephane, to give us this overview. Stephane, as the CEO of the Luxembourg Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, you bring together your background in media, financial services, investment funds, public advocacy, and thought leadership. In 2019, you became a partner for this private equity certificate at the university, and in 2020, you launched the LPEA Training Academy. Today, you keep working on developing private equity-related initiatives, which is why you're here tonight. To that extent, could you please give us an overview of the market? Where are we today and where do we come from?
First of all, good evening, Erika and the audience. It's a pleasure of having me and here with you. And also for the LPEA, it's great to be able to collaborate with Sacred Heart University on these private equity certificate and different programs. So in order to give you this market outlook, please allow me to give you first of all a quick historical view of the Luxembourg investment funds industry. So all started in 1988 with the UCITS directive, which was transposed in the Luxembourg law. That started the whole investment fund center in Luxembourg, and those are the more liquid funds investing, for example, in stocks and bonds, etc. Afterwards, then some new I would call it tools within the Luxembourg legal toolbox appeared. For example, in 2004, that was the CCAR. That's the investment companies investing into risk capital. That was already a good step in the right direction. And in 2007, we even continued with the specialized investment funds, which allowed then also high net worth individuals, professional and institutional investors to invest into such structures which had a good diversified strategy, but allowing also to invest into alternative investments. In 2010, quite easy, that's the birth of the LPEA. So that also was started by local practitioners and experts who had the vision that Luxembourg could continue this great success story of liquid funds in Luxembourg and continue the same with alternative investment funds, which private equity is part of the family. And in 2013, we had the implementation of the AFMD directive. And that also helped out Luxembourg to republish simultaneously its laws on the limited partnerships. So that was really a good move in the right direction because those structures are highly appreciated by the Anglo-Saxon and American world, and they are quite active in the private equity sector. That also allowed us, for example, members of the LPEA or PSF, so professionals of the financial services, to propose depository services for non-liquid assets, and also pushed further the third-party AFM business model, which also found a big success in Luxembourg. And that did not stop, because in 2016, the toolbox was then augmented with the RAIF, that's the Reserved Alternative Investment Funds, allowing them to be AFMD compliant and also to have a quick entry to the market and not being directly supervised. That was also a very helpful tool. And we also refurbished the Luxembourg company laws, which allowed the toolbox also to inject some interesting enhancements that really made sense and also helped out the sector. And that continued so on, and that's where we find ourselves nowadays. So if I would summarize the decades, so 1988, sorry, that's for the UCITS funds, the investment funds world. And then we move on quickly to the 2000s, the decade 2000-2010, that's when the big players are coming to Luxembourg. At that moment, Luxembourg is really pushing into the holding company world. Those are the first structures that also appeared in Luxembourg, and Luxembourg was quite famous for. And then when we look at 2010-2020, that's the big move. That's where we have the AFMD, the new vehicles. And that's also when Luxembourg is moving into the more, or the bigger value chain with the investment fund structures also being in Luxembourg. The PE funds, the growth funds, buyout funds, venture capital funds. That was also a huge increase. We should also not forget that Brexit, due to its uncertainty starting in 2016, helped Luxembourg also to push further and to attract more GPs to Luxembourg, because they needed the EU passport and also the right structures, the well-known structures that LPs like. And that's very important for the people to understand that Luxembourg is really a highly recognized investment fund center, but not only. That we'll certainly discuss further in our discussions. And where are we now? That's, I think, the initial question. So if I would look at my different statistics, 19 out of 20 of the biggest GPs are actually in Luxembourg via funds or different structures, local offices or some substance and experts locally. We have the different structures I mentioned before, 224 CCARs, fresh numbers taken today from the CSSF website, 1,400 SIFs, the specialized investment funds. We also have, and that's really a very huge increase, 4,300 SCSPs, the limited partnerships, the special ones. That's fabulous. I mean, when you think of how many years they took in order to reach that high score, that's fantastic, meaning there's a huge demand for this winner of the private equity Horizon and Luxembourg Fund Center too. And then we have finally the 1,100 raves, also a huge success for Luxembourg. When, for example, we look at the LPEA, we have reached the 300 members. A majority is composed of full members. That's what we call the GPs, general partners, limited partners, the investors, and also family offices, very important for the Luxembourg ecosystem. We also have the service providers, also very important because they help us out with legal, operational, and also tax knowledge, then, which is very important for Luxembourg to thrive and continue thriving in the private equity ecosystem on a global European landscape. And also we have affiliate members. Those are the non-executive directors who have private equity exposure and experience. Also very helpful experience to get to grasp from those persons, because they have done lots of different jobs in the financial sector, have evolved, have understood that alternative investment, specifically private equity, is really a very interesting asset class with the right performance. And it brings also lots of value to the real economy, because it helps to finance SMEs, but not only, but also startups and innovation. So if we take that into account, that's very, very important. And let me just also close on that. For us, it's very important really to underline that private equity is a sector which can attract many talents, proposes many career opportunities, where well-shaped heads, like for example in the Sacred Heart educational programs, are required, and we have to look in Luxembourg but also abroad. That's why we are here today.
Well, thank you so much, Stephane. I was just asking you for an overview. I think I get the full, we get the full picture.
The full package.
The full package. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate. I'm just going to turn now to our guests, Aissata and Jens. You both arrived in Luxembourg a long time ago. It seems that you experienced these changes. You saw the market evolving. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, but first I would like to introduce yourself, Aissata. You came to Luxembourg with a master in accounting and auditing and a master in business. For the last 13 years, you've served as an associate partner in the EY Luxembourg office, in charge of auditing private equity portfolio companies. And today we are very proud to have you to one of the board of Regents Member. On your side, Jens, you have more than 12 years of experience in alternative asset management and another 12 years of experience as mergers and acquisitions lawyer. You're involved in many industries bodies and have taken active role in numerous deals. I would like you to chat, to have a conversation, to just discover where you're coming from, why you came to Luxembourg, and maybe to explain to us your longevity in your company and the role you're playing today. Why here and why still here?
Thank you very much, Erika. First of all, I would like to say good evening to the audience, and I am very honored as a SHULU Board of Regents members to be here this afternoon. I think it's a great pleasure to be surrounded by professionals of your level, and after Stephane's great introduction, I think I'm still kind of like very much convinced about the why I came to Luxembourg. So I finished my studies in the US, where I did a master's degree in business, and I was living in Washington, D.C., and I discovered a vibrant and dynamic and very diverse culturally city. And after my master's degree, I was looking forward to coming back to Europe, working in a place as diverse as Washington, D.C., and I ended up in Luxembourg because I had from the US the view of Luxembourg as a country full of diversity and full of different opportunities. So 14 years later, I'm still here. It means that actually my choice was definitely the right one. And I got the opportunity to start with EY Luxembourg within the telecommunication, media and technology department first. And alongside my TMT journey, I got the opportunity to work on a couple of portfolio companies where I discovered basically the heart of value creation through the portfolio companies I was auditing. I saw how PE funds were just masterizing this heart, and I literally felt in love of the industry, and I ended up fully switching actually to private equity.
Yeah, first of all, good evening from my side as well. Aissata, you have really an impressive CV, and you are now here for so many years. Didn't you have the feeling to go somewhere else, back to the US or maybe London? What really kept you here in Luxembourg?
That's an excellent question, Jens. Thank you very much for that. I think to your point, I had a lot of great opportunities with EY Luxembourg, traveling extensively, going on exchange program to Australia, in London, traveling very often to the US. But anytime I was coming back to Luxembourg, I was like, wow, that's the place to be. That's where I feel really good. Why? A couple of few reasons. First of all, the great business ecosystem. We are the Big Four here in Luxembourg. EY has a massive private equity practice. We are roughly 400 people working only in that industry, and to Stephane's point, it's an industry that is extremely robust here in Luxembourg, great ecosystem, a great educational offering through SHU or even through the LPEA and even through other service providers. You have a great deal flow because, again, we have an ecosystem, a toolbox, and a lot of different elements that makes Luxembourg the place to be from a business standpoint, and particularly for the private equity industry. So what about you, Jens? I know that you have a very impressive background as well. You have an M&A career behind you. You also have a lawyer career behind you. How did you end up in Luxembourg and in the private equity industry?
I think that was not planned. It was by mistake. I was an M&A lawyer, and then I was recruited by one of the biggest private equity companies in the world. But my knowledge about private equity at that point in time was like that, I would guess. So it was first learning on the job. Programs like the one from SHU or LPEA didn't exist at that point in time. And normally in the past, alternatives or private equity is not something that is taught in university. So there is the need for additional education. I didn't have it. I had to learn on the job, and I worked for 2 major PE companies then before I set up my own company.
Very good, excellent. So then in your day-to-day activities, as part of your activities, of your business activity, how do you help your clients navigating the complexities of the PE industry in Luxembourg and globally speaking, actually?
I think one advantage is what you have said, and already Stephane mentioned, that we have so many PE houses here in Luxembourg, so that we see really the broad private equity universum here in Luxembourg. Maybe when you are working in other locations, you have just maybe 1 or 2, at most a handful. But here in Luxembourg, we work with all of them. And then we can compare. We can compare best practices, we can compare good governance, we can see trends. So, and in a lot of cases, the big ones set the trend. And then we can advise and help smaller clients to introduce the same standards and to tell them how to navigate through the jungle.
Absolutely. So where do you see the biggest challenges actually from PE players established in Luxembourg from an operational standpoint?
I think it's the growth as such, because the industry is growing so much. Luxembourg has to grow with it, and all the players around have to grow with it. All the service providers, the big 4, the law firms. And that requires human resources, and human resources that is trained and skilled. And that's why we need people here who are willing to come here, who are willing to get trained, who are willing to take courses, who are willing to learn on the job, either way. But I think human capital is really needed here in Luxembourg.
I definitely could not agree more, Jens, because through the interactions I have with my private equity clients, talent is definitely on top of the agenda, knowing particularly that with the new Gen Z, Y, and X, the opportunity actually they are looking forward to capturing definitely different from what people were looking forward to capturing back in the 80s or in the 90s and the early 20s. So it's about having like a good and strong value proposition for this talent pool in order to attract them in Luxembourg. And then the SHU proposition when it comes to the education piece is a very good one. And then practices as well, such as ours, very, very strong on the market with a huge pool of professionals fully dedicated to the industry is definitely a very good appeal as well for this young population. Definitely.
We might not be able to offer a big city like Paris or London, but we can offer other things that are, in my view, even more valuable for a nice career and for a nice living. So again, we see here the entire industry, and what is also very important, the ways from one point to the other here in Luxembourg are very short, meaning from the PE house to the advisors. It is very easy for me to pick up the phone and call a partner at EY.
Absolutely.
That might not be so easy when I would be in Paris or London. So the connections here are even much closer. And this also counts for the government. And for the government, it is very important that the alternative industry is growing. I think it was even in Prime Minister Bettel's first inaugural address when he put this on the agenda for the government. And all this, what Stephane said, what was introduced, the RIFE, the STSP, that helped the industry tremendously. And now we have a toolbox here in Luxembourg that is, in my view, unique in the world.
Absolutely. And with this toolbox, actually, the industry will certainly grow further. And I think Luxembourg is definitely the place to be for private equity, because it's a factual that Luxembourg became mainstream. Anywhere in the world, if you want to structure your fund, you will have to consider Luxembourg. You may not decide to structure in Luxembourg, but you will definitely have to put that into your list and consider Luxembourg. And it's a massive achievement. Putting Luxembourg on the map when it comes to private equity and to alternative at large is just something fabulous. And being part of that ecosystem, contributing to that with an ecosystem, again, of tremendous qualified professionals is definitely something amazing. And that's again a reason why I'm still in Luxembourg after all these years, on top of the quality of life, on top of the international experiences, and again the deal flow that is attracting actually all these opportunities. So that's very nice.
And the industry is also a fast-changing industry.
Absolutely.
So there are always new things the industry is looking for, has to look for. We will discuss later in detail. And it is up to you at EY, or up to me as an independent director, to give hints, to give directions, to give a helping hand, so that our clients can fulfill the standards going forward. Because in fact, the main goal of the industry is to provide good returns to investors, which are in fact mainly pension schemes. So all of us, insurance companies, again, all of us, and other limited partners. But there are also other things the industry has to look for, and these are becoming more and more, because regulation is not stopping. We will always have a bit more, and we are in discussions with bodies here in Luxembourg how this regulation can look like, and this was always a very good cooperation here in Luxembourg.
Absolutely, and I think this attracts actually a lot of different players. I'm having a focus on the African market because I think there are like huge opportunities for investors based everywhere in the world that are interested actually in that really growth, massive growth opportunities. And I'm currently assisting a sovereign wealth fund who is looking forward to structuring here in Luxembourg a RIFE in order to have like the possibility to have the investors, the European-based investor pool to invest actually in the country where this sovereign fund is based. And the managing director of this sovereign fund is absolutely impressed by the toolbox and by the variety of schemes we can propose and suggest. And our tax team actually is very good as well at explaining the pros and cons of the different colors of regulated vehicles we have, from the less regulated to the highly regulated. Investors are able to find whatever they're looking forward here to structure basically their funds. And we are seeing more and more African funds being based here in Luxembourg, and it means that Luxembourg is very international, even from a business standpoint in that space.
Yeah, in the past it was the big buyout funds who came here to Luxembourg, but now we see that venture capital funds are following.
Yes, absolutely.
Which were mainly focused on the US market in the past. They have discovered the European market, and looking at Europe, there's only one place to be, which is Luxembourg. Or another thing is, a lot of private equity houses have already done healthcare investments in the past. We see this now more and more, maybe also due to the pandemic. And what I also see are venture capital firms who are looking for healthcare investments, so early stage investments. Like for example, a company called BioNTech in Germany, who was 2 years ago just a tiny startup, and now became one of the most important companies on this planet.
Absolutely. So that's a very beautiful picture. So now looking at the challenges, Jens, how do you see that? We talk about talent. Do you see any other area where Luxembourg is struggling a little bit, so to speak, in order to scale up further the PE space here?
Talent is most likely the biggest one, but also we have to look into the new regulations and to the new challenges the business world as such is giving to us. There is, for example, the famous ESG angle, environmental, social and governance matters, that is becoming more and more important for the industry. We all know what the E stands for. For the S, it's a little bit vague then, and what is the G? Yeah, but there are a lot of things that come with it, like, for example, diversity. Yeah, when we look for talent, we are always happy that we see more and more women who are interested in the alternative industry, but in my view, not enough. So we need more women in the PE industry. And then, of course, we have now a new regulation from the European Union that addresses ESG. This has to be implemented, but it does not have to stop there, because I think the industry can even go one step further and become even more compliant than necessary. And we can explain that to our clients. We can provide them. EY has a lot of statistics and research that ESG is not hindering good returns. It's the other way around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, as said, a fast-changing industry we are living on, and I'm not scared that the industry will not make it, because the industry had challenges in the past and prevailed. AFMD was not easy to be implemented. They did perfectly, and we see the fantastic result here in Luxembourg today.
Could not agree more.
Well, thank you very much for this regard croisé and for sharing your personal and professional journeys. We could just like keep talking and keep listening to you, because there's so much to say about the industry. I would like to slowly move to the third part of our event, more or less a panel discussion, because from all these great insight and stories, it is undeniable that the market has changed a lot, has evolved a lot, but much more seems to be coming up. I would like to discuss this with you, Stephane, with you, Jens, and with you, Aissata. What will be the main development? What do you foresee? And I would like also to ask you, for all the listeners that are actually as passionate as you are for the private equity sector, what would be your main advice for someone willing to get in the sector, to just like you step up, succeed, and navigate through all the step changes? So if you can just, in a few words, tell us what's your vision for the future, but also what would be your main advice for anyone willing to enter and conquer the industry?
That's a really good and very interesting question. We talk about talent already. It's very much on top of the agenda, not only of Luxembourg as a PE and financial center, but also for the entire PE industry, globally speaking. There is also digital, because we saw that with COVID, actually, the agenda of the PE players has been kind of like a challenge from a digital standpoint. How do you make sure that your workforce is able to work remotely very efficiently? How do you ensure that throughout the deal cycle of your PE investment, from deal sourcing, origination, due diligences, and deal conclusion, how do you embed digital in your day-to-day activities? This is very, very challenging, and this is definitely something players will have to look at. And obviously the direction for travel has definitely been ESG. I mean, we are definitely talking about something extremely factual, because alongside the chain, people are looking forward to that. You take a look to the LPs, they want to invest their money actually in funds that have aligned values and that have a long-term value creation strategy. It's becoming absolutely mainstream. You cannot ignore that. And if you look at also at the talent side, they want to work for companies who have, again, a very strong LTV strategy and game plan. So those are the areas actually where, funds have to kind of like do their homework, actually, I'll say.
And what about a tip, an advice for someone entering the sector?
Well, I would say just be passionate about the industry. It's a fantastic industry, again, creating value, because private equity companies cannot rely on growth in order to make a good business. They have to masterize the art of creating value. And this complex is definitely the beauty and the DNA of the industry. So how do you create value? How do you ensure that you masterize the operation of the company you're acquiring, you align actually the right strategy, you execute that with the right talent, and how do you play with all the complexities you have around? How do you get comfortable with being uncomfortable in an environment where you cannot have all the information you need to make decisions? So the amount of thinking you have to put on the table to be a very good PE practitioner is just outstanding and amazing. So if you are interested into that, you will just be exceptional in the industry.
I think what is very important is that at one point you need to have the big picture of the industry.
Which Stephane did for us.
Yeah, but
we will complete it together. No problem. There's more to come.
But for us, I think all of us sitting here, it took us many, many years, yeah, and one or the other job. And I think nowadays it can even be easier. When I'm just thinking about the private equity course I gave at SHU or about the webinars of the LPEA, we have there company secretaries, we have accountants. I can't teach anything about PE accounting to an accountant who is working for 3 or 4 years. Same maybe to the company secretary. But the accountant might not be aware of fundraising. Yeah? He might not be aware of all the different asset classes, of tax structuring, of legal matters. And that's why what we do these courses, we want to provide the links between all the important topics. And I think this is very important to really make a career. The other way is just give it 10 years like we did, yeah, and you will come to the same result. Yeah? But it can go much quicker. And I think that's the important factor of education we can provide here in Luxembourg.
And I would also like to add, I mean, exactly as explained by Jens, this is the holistic approach. So it's not only now you're in a silo, just working on a day-to-day basis, always just the same tasks, it's much more. For example, if we look back again at this historical view, the decades 2000-2010, it was really mainly back office jobs. Those are the ones around domiciliation, fund administration, accounting, audit, some classical also legal drafting. And then we move up the value chain with the investment funds. New jobs also appear in Luxembourg when you have those AFMs, the fund managers coming to Luxembourg. Then you need risk managers, you need valuation specialists, you need also compliance specialists. And that's continuously also evolving and transforming itself in Luxembourg. And again, we come back to this initial question and point, how do we then feed this growth? That's simply through talent. And there you go back to also how do you educate those with such specialized programs. And that's why then looking into the future, as you asked then, Erika, I think the new jobs of the future generation, it would be to push a little bit, if we would summarize from a back office to a middle office, those with the risk managers, and then even further look into also the deals. So that would what would call, for example, the front office. And there you could also find some other jobs around, satellite jobs like fundraising, investor relations, specialists like Jens, for example, who did the M&A, be it on the law side, but also on the deal side. It can be also strategy consultants. All those jobs moving up this value chain, those are the jobs of the future in our field, which we will need in order really to fuel this growth in Luxembourg.
Well, thank you very much. It seems that not only is the market, the industry evolving, but it seems that through education, we can make it evolve even faster and in a stronger way. Yeah, education seems to be key towards such a step up. To that extent, I would like to first introduce to the audience our next panelist, Christine. Thank you for accepting the invitation as one of our alumni students. It seems you can maybe testify from what has been said before. Today, you're a finance manager at 3E Capital Partner, which is a fast-forward thinking private equity firm. Previously, you worked at Deloitte as an auditor. You have a bachelor in accounting and taxation and a master's degree in business administration, and another MBA from Heart University, specialized in private equity. Wow. Could you maybe tell us what's your feeling about what has been said before, and especially why did you decide to study private equity and at Heart University?
I think I can only confirm what has been discussed here already. When I came to Luxembourg, I was looking for an international career, international colleagues, using all the different languages, but I was not aware about what is private equity. Of course, during your master in finance, you get exposed, but it's such a little name in a book that I could never imagine that the industry in Luxembourg would be so big. As discussed earlier, I found a certain passion in private equity, that led me from audit to afterwards as well as service provider at Langham Hall. And then afterwards I went to a private equity house. through the course, as the panelists as well discussed, I learned on the job. Until one point I said, I want to learn more about this industry, and I have all these key areas, but the bridge was missing. And so there was a very inspirational person that reached out to me, and he said, why don't you do an MBA? We are organizing private equity courses, and that will bring you this bridge. And that's how I ended up at Sacred Heart University, particularly for the private equity. The classes organized at private equity allowed me to really pinpoint the brains of specialists in Luxembourg. I had classes with GP, I had LPs. One of my professors is a VC investor. He has startup experience. I have classes about risk management. So it really gave me this bridge and even increased my appetite for the industry. So that's how I ended up at Sacred Heart University, and I keep going in the industry.
Thank you so much for sharing this. When we were just talking and preparing this talk before, you also shared with me how the network
exactly
helped you so much to connect with people you will have never connected with before.
No, absolutely. Through the courses and after the classes, before COVID, of course, we went for a drink, and then you start talking to fellow students, also to professors. And during the networking events, for example, at EY or at LPEA, you meet different persons in the industry. For my personal job, this has been as well very valuable, because as Jens also said earlier, you pick up the phone and you can call somebody. We recently I acquired our first investment in the US. I knew who to call through the course, and that's how we set up our company in the US.
Well, thank you so much. We're very proud to have you as a student and an alumni. And I know that you are also in charge of the alumni group for the university, so thank you for that. We are getting to the last part of our event. Ready to take some questions? Just have the chat box. So anyone would like to ask any questions to any of our panelists, should it be Aissata, Jens, Stephane, or Christine? We're waiting for your questions.
We still have lots of advice if you're interested.
So I've got my first questions here. So how is digital transformation affecting private equity? Okay, I think Jens is ready.
In fact, I was working for a big PE house that I think is nowadays one of the front runners. That is EQT, and they really put every work stream on a list and thought about what could be digitalized. And it's not only the so-called investor portal where the investors can download information, their capital calls or their agreements. Now everything was on the list, and the most impressive I've ever seen was that with the help of artificial intelligence, they have written a program to find new investments. Yeah? I'm by far not an expert enough to provide all the details about that, but we then tried even looking backwards. So we asked the program, looking back 10 years ago, and suggest investments to us. And in fact, the program did suggest investments that would have been so successful nowadays. Yeah? And it was first used only for venture capital investments, but nowadays it's used for growth investments and for buyout investments as well. And this is just one story out of many. So there are a lot of possibilities going forward.
I could not agree more with the lot of possibilities you mentioned, Jens, because I'm assisting actually a bunch of my clients on digitalizing a lot of their functions, being IML KYC, being, for instance, the treasury functions, We are doing a lot of digital actually throughout the treasury functions. We are assisting them as well through a platform that we call Managed Services in order to help the clients with the digital solutions for compliance, regulatory monitoring, having a sort of one-stop shop where they can definitely monitor actually the performance of the entire portfolio. And those are solutions that are extremely demanded on the market.
Thank you, Aissata. I have another question between Jens and Stephane. If you see the banking world in Luxembourg on top of the task on leveraging and servicing well the local PE community, sorry. So how do you see the banking world in Luxembourg leveraging and or servicing the local PE community?
We certainly have banks within the association. So I will not now talk as their representative, but I know that due to COVID, but also before, they were interested to digitalize too. So many have also then enhanced their transactions, their processes and procedures. And also those who were front runners understood that next to the classical banking services, depository services, which are required for the different investment funds, they could also develop new opportunities, including, for example, bridge financing solutions or financing, for example. And those services have then been proposed by different players. We cannot now define all of them, but I know that some had some experience before, specifically if they had branches abroad who had also a deep private equity experience in the past, and that helped them also to build such departments in Luxembourg. Meaning that also those banks, since we also have very low interest rates right now, so they were also looking for new revenues. And that was, for example, one of the streams they looked into. And that means that, again, the sector is evolving, is following the trends, and sometimes even running ahead, and then taking the best experiences from abroad if needed, but then implement it in Luxembourg with success.
Yeah. There's even one service that was not provided here in Luxembourg years ago. So when a private equity fund is set up, the private equity house is looking for a credit facility for doing the investments and then calling the capital from the investors later. That was only provided from London or Paris in previous years. But with AFMD and with the funds now being in Luxembourg, the first banks provided that service here in Luxembourg. Although I have to say, when you look at the PE world here in Luxembourg, 19 out of the 20th biggest, and then looking at the banking world, which is much smaller, I think we can still afford a bit more competition here in Luxembourg. I have clients from the US or from elsewhere who come to Luxembourg and say, okay, and then we open a bank account with X Bank. Sorry, they are not in Luxembourg. Oh, why? Yeah, and that happens to me quite often. Yeah, so I think a bit more competition would be nice, and I think the other banks would not fear it here.
We will pass the message. Yeah.
Thank you for your answers. Thank you for the questions as well. How do you see AI potentially increase the quality of decision making in private equity?
That's an excellent one. In EY, we have what we call a next wave. We are thinking about the now, the next, and the beyond is definitely far more down the road. And one of the scenarios we have been exploring actually as part of this thought process was AI. And we kind of like envision, a fund fully driven by artificial intelligence. You grab a couple of folks from Silicon Valley, you put together like a huge algorithm that will be able to go grab a massive amount of data that will help you source your deal, define actually your strategy in terms of managing your portfolio companies in a way that creates that critical value that you need to create. And at the end of the day, find the best opportunity for exit. And we were kind of like, wow, this is mind-blowing. You are in a kind of like matrix type of scenario where AI is definitely driving the whole thing. But we are definitely super far from that because, again, the amount of thinking and the amount of human interactions you need to put on the table throughout the deal cycle of a private equity funds is still very considerable. So the challenge here is to find the right balance between the AI that will help you collect the data that is relevant for your decision-making process and put in front of that the right team that will be able to process that information in a way, again, that create value in a very sustainable fashion. So I think where we are right now is about finding this equilibrium and this balance.
Yeah.
You,
maybe in a few years, 10 years or 15 years, you never know. But at the moment, I think AI can provide a good hint. Maybe push you in a good direction, but the final decisions are still made by human beings.
And it makes sense that it remains like that, but as an augmented human with those capacities, research and collecting data, that really makes sense.
Well, thank you very much. I have another question more for Sacred Heart University, and maybe I'm going to ask the teacher here, the professor, to talk. Is a future private equity course already scheduled? So yes, of course. It's going to be in the fall.
Yes.
But when exactly, Mr. Professor?
I have asked that question recently. I was told the course dates will be provided soon. There is definitely a course in autumn, and I have already spoken with a few guest lecturers already. And what we can always improve things, what we can improve this time. So definitely yes. Most likely starting sometime in October and then until end November.
Yeah. Maybe just for our listeners, the people watching. So, can you maybe just tell us about the course? How is it made? Let's say so. There is the more academic, but you also have guest lecturers, like speakers from outside. That was Christine was saying before. So, how do you organize this course so that people can really get theory, but also practice and meet like real people from the network?
We don't teach it so much from the academic point of view. That was not our intention. We wanted to always teach it from a practical point of view. And first, when we set up the course and we listed all the topics we want to cover, we really went to the Big Four. We went to the law firms. We went to LPEA and showed them what we intend to do, and they commented. And I think now we really have a complete schedule. And we have very specialized topics, and we think that only guest lecturers can provide these topics. So tax in private equity, this has to be done by a tax expert. When we have venture capital, of course, we will have a very interesting guest lecturer who is founding partner of a VC. Yeah? So these are the people who can really present from their day-to-day work life and give their experience and their knowledge to the students.
And I must admit that I'm very impressed as a board of Regents Member for SHULU to see such a very good practical approach actually when discussing with the team, yourself, Antoine, and with the other board of Regents Member, and even with Raymond. We really feel this practical approach stemming from this American anchor actually. I studied in Washington, D.C. I remember that one of my favorite class was about international business. One day our teacher brought someone from a big consulting firm to talk about the expansion of Starbucks worldwide. So the class just walked down the street. We ended up in a Starbucks. We were 20 and we were talking about how this super senior partner from a very top consulting firm managed and drove actually this worldwide implementation. And this is what SHULU is about as well, this practical insight. And this is the power of the SHULU offering. And I think that in Luxembourg, we must be super proud of having such a learning offering actually, very accessible to our local folks.
And there's nothing better than learning really from the best in class and with that proximity, and they are hands-on. So they love their job, they have so many anecdotes, cases to share, and you're really already nearly in the field itself, and that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also from a practical point of view, whatever you're seeing in books is just in a book. Here, sometimes you start a class on one subject, but after an hour, you're talking about the big picture. And talking to these experts, they can tell you anecdotes, they can tell you personal experience that you will never find in books. And this is definitely one of the stronger points of the program.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. You guys are making my conclusion, actually. No, it's just a wrap up. First, I would like to thank you, everyone, for listening and watching the first event of our anniversary series. As I said into the introduction, it's been 30 years now that we've been bridging higher education and the industry. It was a pleasure to talk with you all about this amazing industry that has changed so much, evolved so much, but as you just all said, much more is to come. And it seems that education is key towards this evolution. It seems that we've been confirming what Benjamin Franklin said, an investment in education gives the best returns. I'm gonna close the event on that note, thanking you all again for your participation, for spending some time with us this evening. We'll keep you posted for the next event on other industry that we are bridging. We hope to see you soon, and stay safe.